Today is a really sad day. And I hesitated doing like a video like this, but I was having just a good conversation with a friend of mine who was also struggling with the same news. Today I was supposed to do two videos, one about Candace Clark, Candace Clark, and Caitlin Clark, and but some news came across to me, and I thought, man, wow. So I went on Facebook earlier today, and I saw someone who's a former member of my church, and actually, me and this individual had just been interacting with each other in Facebook Messenger. They saw that I was posting a lot of pictures from California. We're like, hey, did you move? What's going on? I was like, no, just on vacation. And so, but I saw this person put on Facebook, they put a picture, two pictures of their child, and then it was like, hey, the the child is missing. If anyone knows anything out somewhere in the West Coast, and said, please contact missing persons and all of that. And at first I was thinking like Amber Alert, like, oh man, wow, it's a teenager. And I was, just so I prayed immediately because I know this individual, I know them, I know the child, and so I prayed for them, and then reached out to the parent because we had just been interacting on Facebook Messenger. And then a few hours later, the parent posted that, and this is all public, so I'm saying this because it's public, but the parent posted that their child was near a bridge. That was the last time that they were seen, and then a body was found in the water that was their child. Happened around 4 o'clock this morning, somewhere around there. And I was supposed to make these videos today on Candace and Caitlin, but I really was caught off guard by the loss. And I think it's, as a dad, I just got back from sabbatical when I spent every day with my boys, and it was just us four. And we were in Airbnbs together, always together. We were in cars for hours driving and all that kind of stuff, right? And so you just grow in, even though you love your kids, I think most parents really love their children. But when you do stuff like that, you kind of grow in a little bit more of a bond because you're just always together. You're in the same room. Even if you're all on your own devices, like in the evening, we're doing stuff all day, you're around them. And so you get to see sides of them that you might not see because of just the routine of life. And so I just was around my boys a lot. And this child that died was around one of my oldest son's age. In fact, when I told him, he was shocked because he remembered her. And so as I was thinking about this, and I had a conversation with a good friend of mine, we were talking about this because it was, it's on social media, it's on Facebook, and we know the person. And I wanted that person to know, hey, listen, our church is here for whatever you need. Take your time. But I think it's just, they always say like no parent should bury their child. That's one of the toughest things that you can do. And by God's grace, I don't know that pain. But it caught me off guard because this is what I really thought. I thought, you know what? Sometimes, kids, teenagers do some wild stuff. Maybe they do something they weren't supposed to. Maybe they do a little drugs and think like, I'm too afraid to go home or go back to wherever. And so I was hoping that it was something like that. And then I was thinking, other things of, being taken, and then so that's where my mind went. It didn't go to like death and all of this, and it just didn't go there. And so when I got the news, I was sad, but then I just got more sad. I got overwhelmingly sadder, and I think the reason why is because not only do I know the people, know the child, they were recently, they came to my church in June. I didn't get a chance to interact with them, but I saw them. I was like, oh, I saw them at church in June. And, but I was sad because I remember this child as a kid, as a toddler. And when you have kids, whether they're yours or someone else's, you always wonder like who they're going to be when they grow up. You always wonder like who's your child going to be, who are these kids going to be, and you kind of have that perspective, especially when you're older, and you start, your kids start having kids, and you sort of like, when you get to be older, my age, and when you're in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, you start to, your life settles down. All the dreams and goals that you had, they sort of, God answers those. This is who you are. This is who you're married to. This is what you're going to look like. This is what you may. All those dreams that you had in your teens and 20s materialize for either what you thought or what you didn't or whatever it does. But then you start looking at kids and you think, oh, okay, well, let me, how people say like, oh, if I knew now what I knew when I was 22 years old. So you have that knowledge now, and now you want to give it to these children, either your own children or your nieces and nephews or friends of other people's children. You have a knowledge you want to give them because you're hoping that they can take the knowledge that you give them and become something better than you did because you wish you had the knowledge that you have now back when you were 20 years old or 22 or 20, whatever it is. And you don't, but you do have the knowledge, but you try to give it to other kids in hopes that they take it and use it and grow and benefit from it. And some do. But when a child dies, you're left with like the most erratic what ifs. What could that child have been? Who were they going to be? That kind of talk. And then I can't even, as the parent, so when I was on sabbatical, I'll humble myself and share this. I was in Lake Tahoe with my sons. And because I was around them every day and stuff, you notice the pattern of their sort of foolishness. And sometimes, you can let stuff go, but after a while, it's like, come on, man, what are we doing right now? So I'd asked my sons to do something, and I said, please hurry because of this situation. And they took a really long time. And so I was angry, I was upset at them, and they knew it. They could tell by a couple things that I said in my body language. Now, by the grace of God, I don't get angry at them a lot, so they can pick up on like, oh, wow, Poppy's upset. It's unusual for them. But when we got back to the drive home from where we were at this Lake Tahoe. It was this beautiful spot. And it was about maybe a 15-minute drive. And it was quiet in the car. They didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. When we got back to the house, I yelled at my kids. I was really angry at them. And I was really hurt because I had asked them, and there was a pattern of them not forgetting all the things I asked them to do and doing other things. And so I yelled at them, and I don't normally do that. And we had to work through that. I had to ask them for forgiveness, and then part of what I try to do is I want to learn from it. So I asked them specifically, individually, how did this affect you? And I want them to say how it honestly affected them, so that I can grow in conviction for that, because I don't want to. But I want them first to know, as a believer, forget your dad's a pastor. We're not playing that game. We're not playing that I brought you in this world, I can take you out game. I'm a believer, and I failed. I dishonored the Lord. I sinned against you, sinned against him. And I was angry at them, and we worked through it. We worked through that. And throughout the trip, that thought of just like, man, what I hope, I'm trusting that they're good, because I do have a great relationship with them by the grace of God. But I was wondering, like, man, I hope this doesn't really impact them. I hope they're not afraid of me now because I yelled at them. And I don't ever really yell at them like that, but I was really offended, and I just let it go. And it was my sin. I could have kept it, but I let it go. And I was thinking the whole trip at different times, Like, man, if I was frustrated, I'm like, nah, I ain't trying. But I was thinking about the impact it has on them. And this is just me as a dad thinking about me yelling at my children. And so part of why I'm so sad is because I'm thinking as a dad, I'm kind of thinking, and this may even be selfish, but what I would be thinking if it were my children that died. And you start thinking about every time you yelled, or every time you broke a promise, or every time you didn't do something you were supposed to do. You start thinking about that, and you start wondering, there's and then there's just eternity and just the reality of that. If you even have that perspective, and you start wondering, where are they and what are they doing, what are they experiencing? And so I'm really sad because I recently saw them at my church. I was interacting with the parent just 3 weeks ago. Their life was totally different. We were talking about being in the West Coast, and now their child is gone. And so you have to live with that. And so as I've been thinking about, well, a good friend of mine brought up a point, and they were struggling, and I appreciated their honesty. And they said, man, sometimes I wonder, like, why wouldn't God intervene? Why doesn't God intervene and stop that stuff from happening? Why couldn't he do that? And I understood the question, but this is what I said to them, and I wonder what you all would say or think, and feel free to disagree with what I said. But I just said, I try not to go to those places like, why didn't God intervene or do this? Because one, we don't know how often God intervenes for us. Like, there's spiritual warfare that's real that many of us don't even pay attention to or acknowledge. And we have no idea how many times God stopped something from happening to us or to our children. It could be just because we prayed, Lord, protect our children from the evil one. We have no idea how that averted a potential danger. So one, we don't know what God's doing. But then I thought, the second thing I said was, the other thing too is like, so if you think about Superman, right? This doesn't really happen in the movies that much. Maybe a couple, but these are superheroes. They're in a TV show, whatever. If you think about Superman, you often think like, hey, it would be incredible to have like a real Superman. Like, imagine being on an airplane and it's going down and you're terrified, and then all of a sudden it levels out and you realize Superman is, and then you land. We would all that's the beauty of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because we all think like, man, we would love that. We would love to see that happen. Spider-Man was my favorite growing up. Spider-Man and Wolverine, in that order. Spider-Man, Wolverine were my favorites growing up, always. I still love them to this day. And you would think like, oh, it'd be amazing to happen. But here's the thing though, with Superman, right? Like, all the amazing things that we'd watch him do in a movie, the problem is there's too many things that happen in the world. So Superman would not be able to stop every car from getting into an accident, stop every train from going off a cliff, stop every airplane from crashing, stop every person from not jumping off a building. There's so many things that he couldn't do, that if there were a Superman that could do these things, the expectation from people would be like, why didn't you stop everything from happening? Why didn't you stop all of it? And I think sometimes we think of God that way, like, why didn't he intervene? Why didn't he stop that? And I told my friend, I said, bro, I think if he did do that, like, first of all, if he did do that, the expectation would be that he should always and only do that. And that's just not realistic. Not for people that he created with a free will. And then I said, but then how does he determine who does he save and who does he not? Like, why does he stop this from happening? And I'm sure God does this all the time. We're just not. But like, how do you determine, oh, this was good for God to let happen, but not this? I shared this in previous videos, but when my mom was in the ICU, I really struggled because my mom's in the ICU. I had just got on my vacation. It was July 4th. We just got there. I found out my mom's sick. Friday, July 5th, I have to convince her to go with the paramedics. And Saturday, July 6th, she slips into a coma. And then by Sunday, July 7th and Monday, July 8th, she's on a respiratory machine because her breathing is at 40%. And they said if they turn it off, she's going to die because she can't breathe on her own. And she's in a coma. and there's all this stuff happening, kidney, and I think, man, my mom's probably going to go be with the Lord. And I struggled because I had to decide, what do I do? If I go back home, then I'm going to take my boys back home. We're going to basically do the same thing that we would be doing here. The only difference is I could physically go see my mom. I wouldn't have taken my kids to go see my mom. It would have been traumatic for them to see my mom in the bed like that, in a coma. I wouldn't have taken them. So they would have basically been at home every day, just waiting until she got better, doing the same thing that we would have been doing, except we're in California, and I can give them a vacation that I feel like they've earned based on a number of things that happened in my church and my family that we just had to work through. So we decided to stay because I also feel like I have a good relationship with my mom, and I know she's going to be with the Lord. But I had to also consider, there was a time when two of my best friends, Warren and Josh, went to the hospital, and they held the phone up because they said they can still hear when they're in a coma. And in tears, I told my mom, I said, you got to come back, Ma. You got to come back. Like, we need you still here. But then I said, but if you want to be with the Lord, it's okay. I said, it's okay. Go be with the Lord. And I just thought my mom was going to go. So I was just waiting every day for weeks. And as my mom got better, slowly got better, and now she's home. Just saw her the other day, getting back to being as feisty as she was before. But then my friend's mom got sick, and she passed away. My friend who brought me to California to preach for him, his mom died. And I thought, man, the Lord, I thought not many people come back from where my mom came back. I told her this the other day. I said, Mom, you're Superwoman. What are you talking about? You came back from like on a respirator, like many people don't. It's a wrap for them. You came back and you fight, you as bossy as ever. You're going to just give her some time. The rehab, all that stuff. So, but my friend's mom didn't. She went home to be with the Lord, and it was sudden. It was sudden for him. And so it's like, at what point does God say this person yes, this person no? Like if we want God, if we think He should intervene, then what are the parameters for intervention from Him? Why this child but not this child? Why this and not that? And so we were having a great discussion, and I just talked about also, man, this is, part of sound doctrine and enduring sound teaching, and the tough part of being free, having a free will, is that the Lord will, I said, look, bro, if I decided right now I'm angry, I'm going to run these people over on the street, the Lord's not going to be like, hey, you're a pastor, you're a believer, you got kids, you're going to go to jail. He's not going to, I don't think He's going to stop that. It would be, so there's this weird tension of what does it mean to have a free will? But I think the weirder tension is like when we think God should do things that, like, how do we determine because it would only be in our favor. So all this was just going on. We were having a great conversation. And then I just, as we were talking all theological, I just realized, man, forget the theology right now. Someone lost their child, and it's someone that we know, and it's someone that we just saw. And I can't help but think about, like, man, if you're a parent, you're just going to think about your kids and what would happen if. So in these type of moments, I try my best not to think, why didn't God fill in the blank? I just don't think it's wise to go there, because there's a lot of things. And my buddy, we started talking about evil and suffering in the world, and I just said, look, man, this may sound facetious, and I don't mean to be, but I just said, look, fam, this is going to sound like cliche, but to me, the cross, like, this is just what I always tell you what I think. I think the cross settles all arguments on suffering and the problem of evil. If Jesus didn't die on the cross, I think you could make a case that God is unfair, maybe unloving, and I think you could make a case. And by case, I don't mean you'd be right, but it would be much more understandable. But the fact that Jesus died on the cross, I think we're so used, if you're a believer, we're so used to singing about that and hearing about that and hearing and that being referenced. There's some pastors that act like if we don't mention that Jesus died on the cross in every sermon, it's not preaching. I don't agree with that at all. But I think we do communion every Sunday. So if it wasn't about the cross and what he did, we're reminded every Sunday at the end of the message. Or if I'm just wilding and my church is just tolerating what I'm talking about, then we go back to that. But I don't think we really understand like the cross, like the cross was a choice by God to take on human flesh, to live in obedience to himself. I mean, they're three different persons, we get it, but essentially they're all God. And then to take the full wrath of God. You know why Jesus prayed, Father, take this cup from me in the Garden of Gethsemane, just hours after saying, what should I pray? Father, remove this cup from me. This is why I came. Because Jesus, being God, is the only other person who knows what the full wrath of God means and what it's going to feel like and what it will entail. And I think at that moment when he realized, man, this is about to happen, he prayed. The fact that Jesus prayed that when his whole life he never prayed that, and he chose to do this. He told his parents when he was 12, didn't you know I'd be in my Father's house? The fact that he chose to do that, chose to take this brutality, he chose this suffering. Like Jesus chose the most traumatic means in which to die to bring us our salvation. The most traumatic means. He could have easily just come down and people would have worshipped him. He could have did what Satan said, maybe not because Satan said it, but he could have made it simple. But he chose the most traumatic means, the most gruesome physical suffering. And that wasn't the full wrath of God. In those 6 hours, it said that Pilate was surprised that he was dead already, because no one has been able to withstand the full wrath of God. You look at the flood in Genesis 6-9, and you think about all the people that have got killed by the flood, probably millions of people, carnage everywhere, animals, all is just destroyed. Probably billions of creatures gone because of God's wrath. But yet 8 people were spared. So that wasn't the full wrath of God. So whatever Jesus experienced on the cross for 6 hours is greater than the flood that Noah and his family witnessed. Were in the ark for 40 days waiting for it to subside the water. Jesus knew, and he's the only person. And I'll be honest, I don't think the Bible says that anyone will experience the full wrath of God. Even in hell now and in the second death, I don't think they're getting the full wrath of God, because you can't handle it. Only God can handle God's wrath. Satan can't handle it. He would be obliterated. There's no person that can handle it. So they're not even experiencing the full wrath of God. Only Jesus had that moment. And because Jesus is co-eternal and he's in between sort of the human, on the cross, those 6 hours for Jesus were like 6 forevers, because a day is like 1,000 years. Those 6 hours on the cross for Jesus felt like 6 eternities. He's co-eternal. He's not bound by time. He didn't experience the cross just as a human being. He experienced it also as God. It's co-eternal. That suffering that was just 6 hours to us felt like 6 forevers to him. And he chose to do that. He chose to submit to the evil and the suffering that men cause. And because of that, it's just hard for me. It's hard for me to think the problem of evil and suffering is something that should make us angry at God. because Jesus chose the very evil, the very suffering. You know, in 1 Samuel, when in 2 Samuel 12, when Nathan told David that because you sinned with Bathsheba, the sword will not depart from your house. And most people think that that meant his immediate family. So you have his problems with Absalom, and then you have the Solomon, you know, he leads the people astray by building these altars, and people are worshiping, and you see this happen. But that statement, David's sin, set in motion something significant. When he said, the sword will not depart from your house, David's sin set in motion the sword not departing from his house. So it wasn't just Absalom, it wasn't just Abijah, it wasn't just Solomon. The sword went all the way to Jesus Christ. Jesus fulfilled that prophetic word to David. Yeah, in the natural sense, it immediately affected him, but it paved the way for Jesus to experience the sword, the wrath of God, the cup. And that was a choice. And maybe I don't know. I just find it difficult to be mad at God for evil and suffering in the world. But that doesn't mean I'm not sad or devastated. So I'm rambling right now because I had 2 other videos I was going to make, but I just couldn't. Because I was like, wow, I'm devastated. Because I'm just, and as difficult as it is, I still don't have a problem with God and what he allows. Because I just think I would only and always want him to save the people that I know and care about. And he wouldn't be God if he did that, because God shows no partiality, and that would be favoritism. I can't pretend that I understand why he allows what that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, for me, the choice of the cross by Jesus, it trumps every question about evil and suffering in the world. And if anyone knows what it's like to feel devastated, it's Jesus, when he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? So in moments like this, this individual is not a member of my church. I'm not their pastor anymore, so I'm not gonna insert myself in things that I'm not asked to be a part of. I will continue to pray, and I'll hope that, because the other thing I told my friend, and I'm gonna end with this, is that that one of the things that makes God real in a world like ours is when people who go through like imagine, I've heard stories of, like, I remember this one woman was like, I was pulled into essaying at 7 years old, and she was in it for 25 years and found a way to escape at 32 years old. And she wasn't angry at God, but actually accredited what she went through in her escape to him, and she glorified God. And I thought, man, that's redemption, like to bring you from something. If God always protects us from everything, then there's no real redemption story. The fact that you come from this suffering, and I'm not even talking about just to be saved, but there's no Christian, if you're watching now, if you're watching live or later, and you're a genuine believer, you've gone through circumstances that have tempted you or have screamed out, this God doesn't love you. Because we tend to think of love as protecting me from suffering, not from imitating the person who suffered and being allowed in that. This is why the Bible says that we've been blessed by God to share in his sufferings. Like, that's how God sees love. I'm going to let you share in the sufferings of my son, and you'll share in the blessings in eternity. But we see love as protect me from the suffering, and it's antithetical. And the enemy uses that against us to make us think, look, God doesn't love you. You know, he wants us to treat him like a distant cousin, like, hey, we just show up, we sing, we say what's up, we're good. We're at a cookout, let's take a plate and leave. And it's like, that's not, he wants us to think of our Father as a mister. And it's like, no. So I think it's okay and it's right to be hurt and be devastated. I mean, we have tons of Psalms that say as much. But I hope, and my prayer will be that the questioning of the character of God, when that does come up, is immediately brought to the choice of Jesus to die on the cross. If the cross does not demonstrate the character of God, I don't know what will. Saving my kids from some will temporarily do it. But if Jesus choosing to be brutalized, both physically and then spiritually, by the Father who he's always had fellowship with, I can't imagine my kids were distraught when I was yelling at them for those 10 minutes or whatever, however long it was. They were distraught because to them it was, and my youngest son, he said, I'm not going to lie, Poppy, you scared me because you're not normally upset like that. And I had to hear that and take it to the chin and be like, I'm so sorry, son. And I said, look, I was hurt, and I justified yelling at you guys because I was hurt. I felt like you guys, and I just was honest with him. But it hurt me to hear him say that. He was honest. He was shaken. Can you imagine Jesus? Can you imagine Jesus being brutalized, knowing the Father that I've only known his love is allowing this to happen? And even though he understood and chose it, it's not like he wasn't struggling. My kids struggled with me just yelling at them because I don't really do that. I can't imagine Jesus on the cross experiencing that wrath. Those 6 hours on the cross were worse than those 40 days of floods in the Old Testament, or all the destruction in Egypt. That was nothing compared to what Jesus experienced on the cross. So I'm grieving. I'm sad. But I'm hoping that, like many others, including myself, maybe you, that the sorrow and sovereignty, I hope they lead to salvation or restoration or whatever that is. God restored Job after he took from Job. In my new album that I'm dropping soon with my worship leader under the moniker JFK, there's a line that I have in the song, and he sings, I rap, so he's singing, I'm rapping, and there's a line that I say this: you took a lot, it hurt a lot, I'd lie if I say I'm not in recovery. So I'm saying, Lord, you took a lot and it hurt a lot. These last 2 years for me have been trying. My church, life. I said, you took a lot, it hurt a lot. I'd lie if I say I'm not in recovery. But all in all, I am in awe. Like Moses when he saw you there in the shrubbery. So even though, and the song's called Limbo, you got me out in limbo, but ain't giving me no info. I'm staring out the window, 'cause I'm sitting here in limbo. Just sometimes we feel like we're in limbo. You took a lot, it hurt a lot. I'd lie if I say I'm not in recovery, but all in all, I am in awe. Like when Moses saw you there in the shrubbery. I hope that kind of restoration can happen with this dear person who lost their child. I can't imagine, but I can pray for them. It's a really sad day. But the Lord, He's good. He's good. Go to the tape. Yeah, Mark. Thank you, brother, praying for the family. Praying and giving my condolences over the man. Thank you, Shop Talk. Thank you. I literally love this channel so much. Thank you, Bible Note Tech. I appreciate you. Thank you. Christ doesn't view death the way we do. Whoever we lose in his presence, and it's better for them to be with him than to be with us. Lord, help me to live that. Well said, brother. Well said. You know, normally I get hype when I get but I'm just not there emotionally. But thank you. This means a lot. I appreciate you, Note Taker. Thank you. This is no joke. Well, snaps, what I missed. You'll just have to rewind, my brother. Shop Talk. Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you. Means a lot. The question I asked myself if I had a thought of blaming God for my sufferings, thinking he hates me. I'd ask myself, if God doesn't love me, why did he save me? A loss of life is sad. Yeah. No, that's real. He does. It's a good question to ask. But sometimes, sometimes comfort, we always hear stuff like this. God will give you a peace that surpasses all understanding. The scripture says that. I don't know. I was telling my friend, one of my buddies, future elder, the other day, I just said, bro, one thing about prayer that I think we misunderstand is I always think that prayer is supposed to change how I feel. And sometimes it doesn't. I might say, hey, bro, can you pray for me? I'm struggling. And they'll pray for me. And then I'm like, man, thank you. Thank you. But I can still feel angry or hurt or afraid or whatever it is. And I told him, I said, I think we've been sort of hoodwinked by the enemy to think that like once you pray, it's supposed to. I don't think prayer always changes how I feel. I think prayer is a reminder of the grind that I'm in. I'm praying. It's a reminder to press in, but it doesn't always change how I feel. And so I think while it does, don't get me wrong, it can. I don't think it always does. I don't know if it was always supposed to. I think my prayer is a humble submission to say, Lord, I need you. But it doesn't always mean like the moment I pray, I'm going to feel different. No, sometimes I have to learn how to love God when he doesn't do the things that I think he should do, which would be simple, like change how I feel. So yeah. It's a great message, Brother Kurt. I'm sorry for the circumstances that prompted you to make this video, but praying for the family and loved ones of the child who passed. Amen. Thank you, Future. Thank you so much. It causes me grief. It doesn't matter whether I knew the person or not, or if they were a believer or not. Life is a life, yeah. Yesterday, there was a deadly shooting close to my house. I got sad. 100%, Kyle. I think it's okay to be sad. I think it's okay to grieve over the world. I think what I try to avoid is what we're talking about is saying like, man, Lord, why didn't you? I don't want to have a superhero complex where I'm expecting him to save every plane and every person. It's just not real, right? It's just not real. I'll pray for the family of the lost. You talk about, thank you, brother. Real rap, the cross is the only thing that helps me attempt to make sense of suffering and evil. When I'll understand it on the, yeah, 100%. I just think if Jesus didn't die on the cross, I think it could make a case that at least would be much more understandable. But whenever I hear that, I think like, man, how do you process what Jesus did then? How do you process? It's almost like, because again, no one is taking the full wrath of God. That's an insane reality. Like, how do you process that? How do you process him saying, all right, I'm going to leave this comfort and the love I have with my Father and experience the eternal hatred that will feel like eternity, so that the people that are on earth that will get to not experience that wrath, not experience that, even though they sin. Like, it's not like Jesus. Listen, let's be honest, right? It's not like we become Christians and we don't sin anymore. And so, like, no, we sin willfully at times. Sometimes we plan it out. We still fall, right? It's not like, oh, we got saved and so now we've earned a level of, no, there's no one that shouldn't not go to hell and be like, Jesus, why am I here? Do you want me to show you all the things you did in this life? Your good deed. When Jesus said your righteousness must exceed that of the Pharisees, he wasn't talking about like works. He was talking about faith, your character. It was like, man, shoot, there's none of us that don't deserve God's wrath. There's no person that's going to die and think like, man, why am I not in? We're there because of Jesus and his mercy. And it's not a cliche. It's the only thing. It's the only hope we have. So, yeah, thank you for listening. It was just, I don't even know if I should have made this video. I just was rambling, but I'm just affected by this, and I just think about this because a lot of people wrestle with these kinds of thoughts when something like this happens, and so anyway. My brother, thank you, Rich. Appreciate you, bro, all day, man. I hope this side of glory I get to meet some of you, and before I hope, man, you, Jose, Future. I mean, it's just people. I just hope that, man, I don't know if the Lord will do that, but that'd be cool one day. They'd be like, hey, but if not in eternity, hey, it was me, you know. That'd be dope. Last comment. Recently dealing with loss. This really resonates. My response was great sorrow, but also surprisingly immediate thanks to the Lord for his goodness. The grief is heavy, but God is better. 100%, bro. That's a word. That's a word to end on right there. Appreciate y'all. Grace and peace. I'll be back with probably tomorrow with my Caitlin Clark and Candace Owens takes. 2 different takes. But grace and peace, y'all. Appreciate you, man. Love you guys. See you soon.